What does faith look like? Jesus was once asked a similar question. For many people at the time of Jesus, the basis of their faith in God was the Jewish law. You see, there were 613 commandments that painted the picture of what it meant to follow God. An expert in this Jewish law tried to catch Jesus out by asking him which was the most important. It's an impossible question to answer. The various factions of the Jewish tradition had long been arguing this, what was the greatest commandment? Some thought the laws surrounding the Sabbath was the greatest. Others thought the dietary laws were the most important. If they could get Jesus to tell them which law he thought was the greatest, it would generate hostility in those who disagreed. And perhaps they could label him with suggesting something that was heretical. This question that had gotten the Jewish nation in a mix for generations was a simple one for Jesus. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and with all your mind. That's the first and greatest commandment, says Jesus. Nobody could disagree with this statement. This command, which we find in the book of Deuteronomy in the Old Testament, was also part of something called the Shema. Faithful Jews recited the Shema every day. Jesus hadn't told them anything they didn't know already, but he hadn't finished. The Jewish people know there is something special in this command. The problem is they don't know how to fulfill it. How do you love God with all your heart, soul and mind? Well, Jesus is about to tell them. He continues, the second is like it. Love your neighbour as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. Jesus is saying this commandment has equal weight to the first. He's saying this is how you love God with all your heart, your soul and your mind. And just to make sure that there can be no confusion, he tells them a story to illustrate his point. It's a famous parable all about the Good Samaritan. Jesus says, one day a man was travelling from Jerusalem to Jericho. That's not an easy journey to make. Jerusalem is about 3,800 feet above sea level, and Jericho is about 850 feet below sea level. It's the lowest city on earth. There's a valley that runs from Jericho up to Jerusalem. This is the path you would take to make this journey. The man in the story gets attacked by robbers and is left for dead. Unfortunately, that wasn't uncommon. This valley was treacherous. There were many places people could hide to attack you, and there wasn't anywhere you could go to escape. A priest was going the same way, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. Then a Levite came along. The Levites work in the temple. They're like priests. He too passed by on the other side. If anyone is going to help this poor man, surely it will be a priest or a Levite. But they ignore him. Probably got something more important to do. Then a Samaritan comes along. Now, Samaritans and Jews don't mix, mainly because the Jews looked down on the Samaritans. They thought they'd sold out their faith, that they weren't true followers of Yahweh. If anyone has an excuse to leave the man in the ditch, it's the Samaritan. But he doesn't. Jesus says he took pity on him. He bandaged him up. He put him on his donkey and he took him to an inn to care for him. He paid the innkeeper to look after the man and promised to return to pay any extra expense. Jesus ends the story by asking a simple question. Which one of these was a neighbour to the Jewish man? The answer is simple. The Samaritan. Jesus tells the expert in the law to go and do likewise. Now, the road from Jerusalem to Jericho took you down the valley of the Wadi Kelt. This was a stream that flowed at the bottom of a steep ravine. When you look at this road, you wouldn't walk at the bottom of the valley. It was too dangerous. Wild animals could easily attack you, and sudden flash floods from heavy rainfall would often flow over the side of the ravine, turning the stream into a rushing river. So you'd walk up on high on the bank on either side of the ravine. It was still a dangerous journey. It was isolated, and there were lots of hiding places where someone could jump out and attack you. When Jesus tells his story, he says the priest and the Levite walked by on the other side. I imagine this as they basically stepped over him or they walked round him. That wasn't the image Jesus had in his mind or the listeners had when they heard the story. To walk by on the other side meant you were a considerable distance apart. So let's revisit the story with that extra information. The priest and the Levite see a man lying down, perhaps dead. He's on the other side of the valley. To get to him would take considerable effort and time and danger. They'd have to go into the bottom of the valley, cross over and come up the other side. When they got to him, there was no guarantee that they would be able to help. So they did what most of us would do. They carried by on the other side, justifying to themselves that they couldn't help. But the Samaritan man went out of his way, his time and his expense to see if he could make a difference. Now, of course, there's a different way to look at this. Perhaps the priest and the Levite were on the same side as the man who'd been left for dead. They saw him in the distance and didn't want to get involved, so they walked down into the bottom of the ravine to cross over onto the other side. The point is, how willing are you to go out of your way to help someone in need? Or how far out of your way are you willing to go to avoid helping someone in need? Now, we're spending a few weeks exploring what it looks like to place our faith at the centre of the action. Last week we talked about how we can take responsibility for developing our faith. Today we're thinking about how we can demonstrate our faith. We could spend ages debating about what it means to be a true follower of Jesus. What does it look like to live out our faith? But the answer is quite simple. It's love God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind, and love your neighbour as yourself. How do we do this? Well, part of it is being willing to go out of our way to help someone in need. I've been so inspired by the countless examples of people doing this at the moment. Captain Tom raising almost £33 million for the NHS. And this has sparked a whole host of creative fundraisers. Callum Webb, who's part of our Shape group, has been using his 3D printer to print PPE. Now that is faith in 3D. Through our care teams at FBC, we've been able to give 93 care packages for local residents in care homes and 90 gift bags for care workers. We've also delivered care packages to families in need. Thank you to all of you who have been part of making this happen. What does it look like for you to love your neighbour as yourself? How are you able to demonstrate your faith through the way you care for your community at this time? It's not an easy question to answer because part of the way we care for people is by staying away from them. How far out of your way are you willing to go to help someone in need? Just like the Samaritan in the story, who was willing to cross over to the other side of a ravine to help someone. How far out of your way are you willing to go? The next question is one I find helpful and challenging as I think about how do I love and care for the people around me. What does love require of you? What does love require of me? Well, it requires me to think beyond just myself. But it also requires me to not do something that would put myself, my family, or the people I'm seeking to help at risk. I don't think it's rocket science. A bit of common sense goes a long way. Doing things like checking in with your neighbours, offering to get shopping or prescriptions for people who are vulnerable, letting people know you are there and can help if they need. If your street hasn't got one already, set up a WhatsApp group so people can feel connected and ask for help. Ask yourself that question. What does love require of me? And be willing to put it into practice. And if you're wondering, why should I go out of my way to help someone else? Well, we're talking about how we can demonstrate our faith. How can we show through our attitudes and actions the difference Jesus has made to our lives? How can we share the goodness of what Jesus has done with us, with others? Why should I go out of my way to love others? Well, simply because this is what Jesus asks of me. As a follower of Jesus, this is what faith requires of me. So have a think about that as we sing this song. What does it look like for me to love my neighbour? How far out of my way am I willing to go to care for someone in need? What does love require of me? So I'm joined with Jack, who heads up our care teams at FBC, and we're going to talk a little bit about how we can demonstrate our faith and love our neighbours. So Jack, how does this work for you? How do you demonstrate your faith?
Well, I think it's quite important to acknowledge up front that we don't have the monopoly on this. There's loads of people who don't follow Jesus who are out doing great work in the community. But if you do follow Jesus, then it's a non-negotiable. So the care teams were a really natural way for me to get involved to try to demonstrate my faith at FBC. And I think one of the great things has been when I've got a God prod and I've been encouraged to step into something that really is out of my comfort zone. And my first thought is I don't want to do that, and I don't have the skills to do that, the capacity, don't have the courage to. And then, the prods continue, so I give it a go. And then I find there is this thing that Priscilla Shirer calls the God margin, where you couldn't do it on your own. And God will provide resources, people, and sometimes you don't even know how you got there. It's like you're looking at a great big wall and you think, I can't get over this. And then all of a sudden you're on the other side of it and you look back and you think, well, I know I didn't do that on my own. And so through trying to demonstrate my faith, through reaching out to the community, I find actually I develop my faith because you see God at work. And the people that you're involved with, sometimes it can be a really small thing that you've done, but you see them walk a little bit taller and feel a little bit braver themselves. And that just feeds back into my faith and confirms that I'm in the right place doing the right thing and that I should keep going even if I feel weary or that I don't have the courage to carry on.
That's excellent. I love that language of the God prod and the God margin, and I love the fact that when we allow God to nudge us and we step into it develops our faith, that we see God at work in us and through us, and we grow as a result of that. So, what are some of the examples of where this has happened, of how the care teams at FBC have been able to reach out and demonstrate faith and love neighbours?
Well, I think we've been experiencing difficulties in our natural way of approaching this through the corona crisis. We would normally physically as well as figuratively walk alongside people. And so we've had to think a bit differently outside the box. And I think, we've done lots of things over the last few weeks, including preparing baby boxes for vulnerable expectant mothers. We've provided food packages. We've paid people's gas bills, things like that, just to try and keep people going through this difficult time. But a way that has really sort of been exciting for me, and I think lots of people across the care teams, has been providing the care home goodie bags, which was an idea from the Link Visiting Scheme, which we then expanded to include all of the staff as well, so they would get goodie bags. And it's something that, even though we can't be together as a community, we have as a community been able to pull those things together. And the donations coming in, it's been huge, and the children have been involved as well, providing pictures. So to get that sense of community that we all are used to experiencing on a Sunday and other times throughout the week in this difficult time has been really, really encouraging. And then actually one of the care homes put lots of pictures all over Facebook of the residents receiving their gift bags. And so it was great to see our community passing on to another community, and it being that us seeing God's love being shared among the community like that. That was very repetitive.
Yeah, no, that's really good. I mean, and it's a great example, isn't it, that the care team packages for the care homes, of how our community or the community can come together and do something that actually seems relatively simple but has a massive impact on the lives of the people who benefit from that. And that's what we're talking about, simple ways in which we can demonstrate our faith to our communities and love our neighbours. And if you're not sure where to start or how to begin that, just head over to fbcnext.com/mynextstep, and there's a page there all about with practical resources and tips for how you can demonstrate your faith and reach out to your neighbours and show love and share love with them.